Hello, Abigail. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing fine, thank you.
Good. Well, Abigail is a teacher and LGBTQ activist from Chile, and her interests include the use of performing arts as a tool to teach a second language and the impact of culture in education. She was a SUSI scholarship recipient in 2016 due to her work in theater and gender equality. So here we are. Thank you for sharing this session with us, Abigail, and all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start recording. Can you hear me
Yeah,
well?
yeah, perfectly
Okay,
well.
good. So there we go. Um, all right. So hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time presenting in front of so many people, so I'm really excited. And today, what I want to talk about is about materials and resources in the classroom and how we're representing minorities. I'm just going to start a little bit with about me, just for you to know who is talking to you. I was an activist in Fundación Iguales for 6 years, from 2013 to 2019, and um, I was a former scholarship recipient from the SUSI scholarship. Uh, because of this experience, I became really interested in more like about racial diversity. Because I got a scholarship through my work in gender equality. I'm also an actress. Um, and so I've been working in a theater company for almost 6 years, representing stories of women who have gone through violence with their partners. Um, so yeah, here I became more aware of like that there are more problems, not just like what I knew about, and I became more interested, but I'm not an expert on them. So for this talk, I'm gonna talk mostly about, as the title says, representation of the LGBTQ plus community and racial diversity, mostly in Chile. Um, I am gonna talk about a few experiences outside of Chile, but it's going to be more about you, teaching you more about the reality I have here in my country. Um, and oops, sorry. How do I? Oh, again. There we go. And in the textbooks, usually, how our students feel included. Do they feel represented or not? I'm going to start with my experience as a student. First of all, this is something important I think I should mention. I label myself, I identify myself as a lesbian. Um, I'm not fully out, but because of the purpose of this presentation, I thought that it was important to mention, um, because I started questioning many things when I was a teenager, when I was a student in high school. I wanted to see more representation about me, about what I was feeling, what I wanted to know about myself. Um, in my school, I used textbook that was provided by the school. I went to public school, and I never felt represented in the materials. Not with the textbook, not with other materials. I never saw anyone similar to me going through my same experiences and my same feelings and questions. And by that time, I just was expecting to find in the materials mostly stereotypes. I was looking for that. I thought that stereotypes was the way for me to learn and be able to feel, um, that I could relate to. I didn't find that neither. And then when I got into college, I realized that I didn't need to rely on stereotypes to feel represented, that it's more about how I feel as a person and how I am perceived. But many times we're being taught through stereotypes. Um, then as a teacher, I started reviewing and analyzing more textbooks, and I realized that not many things changed. Unfortunately, I didn't see representation neither. Uh, and I started, like, for my first years in college, for my student practicums, I started using certain platforms that were more to teach vocabulary and teach like strategies to for my students to sit on like standardized exams, but nothing with real content, nothing that I thought that I could include something from myself, and that something that the message and the values that I wanted to give. I never felt that in the in the places that I would use it using. Also, I realized that this school policies in certain schools where I was teaching were not um, allowing me to be very open about what I actually wanted to teach my students. And the parents many times were also like a big reason why I didn't really talk much or didn't really take the risk to talk about certain issues. So overall, with all this, I found that the problem was that there was no representation. As a student, I never felt represented, and I was unable to make my students feel represented. And so one day, I um, recently, a few months ago, I went through Book Depository because free shipping, it was very easy for me to find materials there. And I looked at many children's books. I thought they have more basic vocabulary because I teach two levels, or I have taught in like in places where the levels of English are not very high, are not very proficient. I prefer to start using more simple texts. Also, because I like working with theater, it allows me to represent more stories because my students will already know what to do. I can like separate like scenes and create characters. It's very nice to work with children's stories. And I thought I want to include some of my message in this material. But then I found that that didn't represent me either. What I had from public schools didn't really help me. And even if I bought my own material, was not going to help me neither. I could perfectly show the books that I found about uh, racial diversity, usually about the African American community. It's not a reality that we have, or I can show diverse families. We don't have a legal status for same-sex marriage. The same-sex marriage doesn't exist here in Chile, and the homoparental adoption also is non-existent here. And most examples I found were children being very happy with their parents that were like same-sex, uh, already married, and they had a very different life. I didn't really feel comfortable showing that because that's for us just a dream, but not the reality. And then I thought, but I also need this. I want to teach vocabulary. I want to teach maybe inclusive language with this. Am I gonna fall into overgeneralizations? Am I gonna start relying on like stereotypes? I was very scared, honestly. I didn't know who to ask for help. Didn't know what to do. So I just started like asking other people what they thought about it. And last year, I studied in Israel. I took a year off after graduating from college, and one of my flatmates was from Zimbabwe. We were watching the news about a few months ago about the Black Lives Matter and all the situation that was happening in the US. And we started talking about um, race and how it's approached and how people act and react towards race. And she told me that she doesn't even talk about it because it's a very difficult topic, and nobody understands what she's going through. And I asked her, like, what's the deal, like what's the problem. She said she also felt discriminated. In my head, and because of my own prejudice, I thought, wait, you come from a place in the world where you, like, for many years struggled with segregation and race. It's very um it was a hot topic, and you still feel discrimination. I thought that was like something that was already like you overcame that. And no, I was wrong. I was wrong. It's still a topic that a lot of people struggle with. um so she told me about her experience. She told me that she doesn't feel included neither. She doesn't know what kind of materials um what kind of materials she would use as a teacher, because she's also a teacher, and if she had to teach about like race, she didn't also know what what she would use. um and she told me about her experience. She went to private school. Uh she had to pay for her textbooks, and even with that, she didn't really feel represented culturally. But the materials that she used were from Cambridge. And had she been in a public school, she would have used more local materials. But then she told me about this experience. This is what I wrote here. She once had to write an essay, no, a poem about snow. All the class had to write about that. And the teacher was like, how am I gonna make my students write about snow if many of them have never seen snow? Like, this is Africa. Like, we are using materials from the UK, and that's fine. It works in the UK, but it's not our reality. And then I realized, so I'm right. Just because something is like made in another like English speaking country is gonna like work just for me, because my reality is different, my culture is different. um I'm not gonna go into like the experiences like so deeply because I want to move on. But then I thought of the problem of immigration and discrimination in a more local setting, in Chile in this case. Unfortunately, in Chile, we have a lot of discrimination. I kind of grew up thinking that we were a white country. I grew up with people, like usually adults, saying, "Oh, we're whiter than other Latin American countries, and therefore we're superior." And it took me a while to understand that that was not the case, because you just grew up with this idea, and that's very sad. And years go by, and people still believe that. And we've got a lot of immigrants from all these countries that are less like white than we are. And people think that they have the right to start looking at them in a like inferior way. And here I have this report, this study, manifestations of racial discrimination in Chile, and the study of perceptions. And more than 60%, almost 70% of people who were asked about their perceptions, their own self-perceptions, they identify Chileans identify themselves as whiter than other parts in Latin America. It was just not the people I grew up with. This is a general idea. This is a general like perception that we are superior just because of our skin color. And if we're real, we're not really like, we're not even pale. We don't even have like fair like skin color, to be honest. Like, at least not the average people. So we're kind of like we want to believe that we are superior in a certain way. We just don't know how, and we're trying to pretend that we are. It's just something that it's It's very damaging for our own society. And worst, we think that that gives us the right to treat other person differently. So because of that, unfortunately, immigrants have suffered from these consequences. Um, Throughout the last 10 years, we've had immigrants from different parts of the world. We've had like waves of immigrants. First, I remember when I was younger, I saw a lot of people from China, and people made a lot of jokes about like Chinese people that they. I'm not gonna repeat them, but they made a lot of jokes about that, like, oh, like look at them and look at us. Then we had people from Peru, we had people from Colombia, we had people from Venezuela, and the newest and biggest wave of immigration has been people from Haiti, and they have been the most discriminated ones because of their skin color. Because you grew up in Chile thinking that Black people doesn't exist and that shouldn't exist here. So this is the point where we need to have representation, because now this is a reality. We have to understand that we're not a country, a white country. We're not. We were never like that. We would be considered like people of color, like in the US or in some parts of Europe, or probably in all Europe. We just have to come to terms with our own reality, because the more we're trying to hide the fact that of who we are, who we actually are, we're damaging other people. So, um, as I said before, people from Haiti has been the one that have suffered the most. Uh, and I got in contact with a woman from Haiti. She studied here in Chile for her last 2 years of high school. And she told me a little bit about her experience. Because of the language barrier, I don't speak Creole. She doesn't speak Spanish very well. I wasn't able to ask her so many questions. But like overall, this is what I got, and I got the general idea of what I wanted. Um, she told me about um, how her classes were in when she was in high school. She told me that the teacher didn't use any like specific textbook. The teacher, he would use like the books and the materials that he created, but usually were just full of text, not no images at all. So she wasn't able to relate to any image. Uh, and she attended high school with other immigrants from the country, mostly from countries that I mentioned before, República Dominicana, Venezuela, and Colombia. And because of this, is that she found support, because she knew that other people, the other most of her classmates, were also going through a similar situation. Um, and the teacher, regarding materials, the teacher was able to adapt most of the activities, but because of this language barrier, he wasn't able to communicate with them in Spanish. But she told me that most people who were also from Haiti knew have had a very like proficient level of English, but the Spanish speakers didn't really. So most classes were just in Spanish, and she struggled finding times to communicate in English. It was like more difficult. But in terms of materials, she told me that because the teacher didn't have the textbook, he was more willing to adapt the activities and find some representations. It was just very difficult to communicate. So that gave me the idea. I I'm not trying to say that textbooks and materials are the problem, but when we don't know how to be flexible with them, it can become a problem. Um, the last um, the last problem, also a little bit connected to what I said before, is that we live in a very traditional society, and this is regarding the LGBTQ plus community in Chile. Um, where am I? Sorry about. Um, the Mobile, which is the organization that has been working with LGBTQ plus issues was the first organization in the country for at least like 30 years. Every year publishes this human rights, this report on human rights for sexual and gender diversity. And earlier this year, they published this report that is very, very scary, because since they have like been keeping track of the cases of homophobia and transphobia in the country, the data, according to from 2019, has shown that the cases have increased by 58%. And the level of violence on all these events have been greater than previous years. All this is because we are not taking, we don't really have any space to talk about this without this becoming a problem. The times that we have tried to talk about issues, we have tried to integrate a little bit of education about or awareness about this, the struggles of the LGBTQ plus community has been really difficult. People don't want to listen. And for example, we have the example of the Bus de la Libertad, which is the bus of freedom. It was brought twice to the country as a protest against the approval of the Ley de Identidad de Género, which is similar to the Gender Recognition Act from the UK. I think it's the one that's from 2004. It has similar points and it's the similar concept. It was approved a year later, but they did this whole performance with the bus going through the streets from the capital and other cities, showing this bus that said, boys have a penis, girls have a vagina. Do not let them fool you. If you were born a man, you're always a man. And if you were born a woman, you're still a woman. Like, they just want to make clear that trans rights don't exist in the country. And they don't have any problem like letting like that show. Another situation that we had a few years later was the book Nicolás tiene dos papás. Nicolás has two dads. This was very controversial. Also, it was also published by the Mobile, by this organization that published this report. And for months, this book was banned from some schools. There were videos of like a lot of people protesting against this book because they thought that it was too explicit. And the book was about a boy, Nicolás, growing in a homoparental house. That was it. Like, you see in some pages that I have it here. Give me a second. I don't know if you can still see.
Yes, we can see it.
Good. Thank you. So, I'm still trying to use. There you go. It's not explicit at all. This was an attempt to show a little bit about like diverse families, and it's just about a kid sharing with his two dads and his biological mother, and like having friends, sometimes visiting his mother and her family, and that was it. That's the whole book. And this was very, very problematic. Like, it was just insane. So that showed how behind we are from from getting the big steps. Fortunately, we have been able to include more diversity in the media, in TV, in some TV shows. But in terms of education and what we can use in the classroom, this is still very difficult. I have another experience here from Diego from Chile, and he overall says that he never really saw any example, any representation of a same-sex couple in the textbook, or about a trans child, or anyone, like nothing that could represent his community or part of his community. Um, and even today, now he's studying to become an English teacher. He doesn't see anything like that on the textbooks that he has to analyze. So, um, and the teachers didn't really know how to talk about these issues neither. There are teachers who want to um, raise the topic. They want to talk about this in the classroom, but they just don't have the tools. We are not taught in college how to do this, and not just about the LGBTQ plus community in general. We don't really know how to talk about minorities or how to create our own materials. So from all the data that I got from the interviews, there's one question that they were all able to answer. If I were to decide what to include in the textbooks, what would I do? I forgot to write the rest. In terms of LGBTQ plus answers, like regarding that, it's about it's about showing the LGBTQ plus people in their everyday lives, that we have a life like anywhere else. I mean, anyone else. Like teach about the concepts. What's the difference between being asexual and bisexual? What is the difference between like gender expression or gender identity and sexual orientation? Do they have to go together? Like if you feel that you like a disconnection between your sexual organs, like biological sexual organs, to your gender identity, do you have to necessarily be gay? Like all these things, people have a confusion in their minds, and they ask those questions, like they ask it like that, like people sometimes don't really know, and you don't have any kind of guidance where to look for. There are some websites, but you have to know how to look for them, and you need to train yourself to look for the right information, but someone has to teach you. I mean, it's not just it's not just about training yourself, because that's what we had to do. Not everyone can train themselves. You should be able to lead people. In terms of like racial diversity, not showing people of color just because just when they did something remarkable, just an example. Not show them, for example, like how I have it here. Wait, sorry. 2 pages of a book. All the other examples are people, like usually white people. Why do you have to feel represented just in 2 pages of a book when someone did something important? You deserve more than that. You're part of a group. You're part of a society. And they all agree with wanting to have pictures that show how they really look, like people that look like them, people that look like me. And so this is the slide that I already showed. The only slide, the only page I found in the 9th grade book that I could feel represented somehow is in Unit 4, in the presentation of Unit 4, that is for respecting traditions, in which they talk about our local traditions. Chile is a very long country. You're still overgeneralizing the traditions of just one country, but at least they included something more local. But that's it. That's it. I don't feel like I can relate to anything else in the book. There are other representations, like specific examples, like an Indian-born immigrant talking about the struggles with immigration, or in of the unit of disabilities, that's the name of the unit. This is the only place in the book that you find other kind of like people with disabilities, and that's it. And the rest of the book, just white people. And so oh, and here, and another that's volunteering abroad, and this is for also the 11th grade, and that's it. The rest of the things you cannot really relate to. So I understand that there are challenges. It's not as easy as be like, oh, just create your material, it's fine, like you got it. It's more than that. Teachers are not well known for having a lot of time, especially now with Corona. We're always busy with lesson planning and grading and answering to parents and students, and finding some time to just like continue creating more material. It's very, very difficult. We don't have time, I understand. Also, we have the school policies and we have parents. Parents also want to have more control of the content that their children are receiving. There's also a problem of feeling that you don't really know much, that you're not prepared, therefore you're not going to do anything. And it's fine. It's fine. I was not taught this. Many of the people that I have talked with were never taught this. We have been learning throughout the years about this, and and um and that's it's totally fair. We are all learning on our own pace and in their own way. We just have to be very respectful to how much other people know and being able to share the knowledge. Also, always paying attention to the backgrounds becomes very difficult. Being able to recognize their individuality when you have a classroom of 40 something students, almost 50 students, it's very difficult to, first of all, remember the needs of your students, the interest of that they have, the just even sometimes remembering their names. It becomes a huge challenge. Uh, that's also something that it's very difficult to like solve. And the monitoring of hate speech and making this differentiation with freedom of speech. Even adults struggle with this. Many people cannot separate both, but because you need to have some kind of like emotional maturity, you need to have some kind of like knowledge, you need to have some experience also connecting with people that are different than you, and being able to ask questions. Many people just like think that oh, like they're gonna like laugh at me or mock at me if I ask a certain question, and so I'm just gonna continue doing this, and probably I'm just gonna continue just promoting hate speech. And it's very difficult to tackle that because nobody wants to talk about it. And I also understand that it's something that I don't have the answers for, like to like overcome this, but I do have maybe a few suggestions. Considering that we don't have time as teachers, if you don't have time in your classroom or outside of the classroom, you can still do something. You can still make a change. You can still like try to raise awareness. I mean, more than try, you will do. You will. If you want to do it, you will do, even if you have like a little time. And that will come with like your own activities and the content that you're teaching. If you have to do an activity, add more options. Normalize diversity and do not overwhelm your students with this diversity. Do not show like a gay couple just because. do not make your classroom meaningless. You do not make your lesson meaningless. If you're gonna show an example of something, do it because you really want to share some kind of knowledge with that, some content with that, and teaching some values, teaching them about tolerance, help them be more critical thinkers. Um, with that also, do not follow stereotypical or social gender roles and examples. We don't need a lot of time for that, just awareness of not doing it. Um, if you have to teach content that is obligatory, that it's mandatory, uh, try to add something special. Maybe add a few more questions by the end that come up from you related to what you had to teach, but something that's more like that you think that's gonna be more debatable or will help them just think about um, what you're asking them before answer. um, give your students options, be flexible. With this flexibility, also understand that they're also in their own journey, and they also come from certain backgrounds in which some of them, their parents have been able to show them more diversity, or in their house they hear more tolerance from adults. Some others don't really, they hear hate speech all day, so they imitate that as well. Be mindful that that's a reality and that they're all in the same group, and that's something that you just have to be flexible, but also like have your limits. um, Give them examples of people who have fought for their rights, as I said before, meaningful examples, not just what I've seen in some materials is that um, they talk about they show the biography of a pioneer in something, or an inventor, uh, or I don't know, like a big artist, a big musician, a big playwright. What about being able to also show the biography of an activist, or someone that just like did a huge change in their own community, not just about LGBTQ plus issues, not just about race, about anything that involves normalizing this diversity, because we're all diverse. um, and if you're going to be kind to your students, you also have to be kind to yourself and understand that this we're all in this together, we're all in this journey together, we're all in the same boat, we're just in different levels probably, but that's fine. That's fine. If we work together, we're going to get to the point that that we want. And always, even if you don't have time, always listen to your students, never tolerate prejudices or offensive language, and build a relationship with your students. I know that there are some teachers who know that they will not have time during the lessons to get to know their students, so they hand like a kind of like it's not a form, but it's kind of a form, like asking them like more personal information, like what's your favorite candy, what is your favorite song, what is your favorite artist. So for example, for their birthday, they give them a candy, their favorite candy. That's also building relationship. um, Now if you do have time, you can make your own material, or you can use TV series, movies, songs, which is something that in order to teach English or whatever second language you're teaching, we use a lot. uh, Always be mindful of you checking the material first, because many times there are a lot of stereotypes, and we don't want to promote that. um, Also, you can let your students create their own material. um, I didn't really do it. I didn't do it with this in mind, but here I have an example of of a comic that one of my students did. It was for a private lesson. Um, we were talking about friends, and she was describing her friends because we were using um, like vocabulary, like adjectives, and I realized that she had in her comic, she had more diversity than what I saw in the whole book that we were working with. Like in just one activity, she was able to show me her reality. And that's very, very important because she also felt considered. Like, wow, the teacher wants to know who my friends are and what my friends look like and how I relate to my friends. And that's beautiful to see. It's not like a robotic um, image or view of friends, or they don't look all alike. um, do your research. um, you never stop learning. Never will You will never stop learning. And be mindful of the sites or the books that you look at. Like, try to do your research of the sites that you're looking at. um, that's part of like training yourself how to discriminate information. um, Talk with your students and talk with other teachers. Create Make projects together. If you know that there's another teacher, even if they don't teach the same subject as you do, but if you see that there's someone struggling with the use of inclusive language, try to like work with them. Maybe not like teach them like, hey, I'm gonna like teach you inclusive language. Maybe just make up the proposal of like making a project together, and then you can integrate inclusive language in the project. Or if you know that there is a teacher who wants to share their experience, or you would like to learn from the teacher, also try to like make that connection. um, Teach your students, and also keep in mind that yourself, that it's okay to disagree, and being always open to debate. And debate in a sense that where you're not hurting anyone and your students are not hurting anyone. That's part of like making this balance and not tolerating these prejudices or any offensive language between your students. um, but it's your job also to create, our job to provide a safe space in our classroom. um, and again, same as before, be kind to yourself and understand that this is a journey. And if you have time, also listen to your students and not tolerate prejudices or offensive language, and build relationship with your students always. And I think that is it. um, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. It was much better than I expected. So I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Abigail. Yes, if anyone wants to pop up some questions in the chat box or open your microphones. And
Oh, here. Okay, like I'm trying to read the chat. Mm, wait, I don't see any question.
I think they were not. Mm-hmm.
No, I don't see any. Oh, here I found one. What would you put in your textbook? Could be very powerful. That's the thing. Depends on what I want to teach. I don't like just putting like content just because I do have my set of values. First of all, anything that it's about tolerance, and if I'm gonna share a story or share um, some kind of text, or even like, no, this is like for textbooks, but even like when I show videos or songs, I like to have like the background of where that was created, or the origin of the person, like background or whatever thing I want to refer to. And from that, based base my like what I would like to include. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not racist, but yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, Abigail. And we invite all of you to stay tuned for the next coming 2 sessions. And in 15 minutes, about 15 minutes, so you can take a break now if you want to.
Yes, I'd like to thank you very much, Abigail, personally myself. It was a great session, and thank you so much for putting your thoughts and your ideas and sharing them with us. It's been lovely.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.